Hello, this is Thought for Action in Guatemala with Antigua Forum. We are change makers in action, meeting in Antigua, in Guatemala, so that we will be organized, we will be working at a workshop to identify specific ways we can continue being change makers in action. Today we have among us three extraordinary people that have done the impossible, and we will start with a conversation with Ruth Richardson, former Minister of Finance of New Zealand, the woman who actually changed the whole fate of New Zealand, and it's an extraordinary experience we would like to share with our audience. We will have together with us as well two other young extraordinary people, James Schuller and Mickey Costa, both of them young entrepreneurs that they're changing not just their own life, but actually they're changing the lives of our policymakers. And it would be wonderful to start with Ruth. Please let us know how was your experience, and more importantly, I would like to understand, and our audience would like to understand, what happened before you came to New Zealand? Ministry of Finance position. What was the situation then?
New Zealand was a country that had made bad policy choices, and those choices were to be a closed economy, an economy that had more faith in the government than in the market. So businesses were government facing. If there was a decline in the prices for what we produced, then there would be a subsidy to pretend. So there was a huge pretense. We pretended we had full employment. So the Railways Department, owned by the state, employed 25,000 people when only 5,000 were needed. So there was a huge pretense, and of course in time, it was a myth. And the myth turned into a crisis. We pioneered monetary policy, fiscal policy, free markets, labour market reform, reform of the state, rethinking the role of the state, the way in which the state operated, a comprehensive program of political entrepreneurship and policy innovation that transformed my country's fortunes. Policy matters. If you have very bad policy, that condemns you. It condemns you. High unemployment, the bankers call the tune, we decided another future.
What would be very important for us to understand is if you could kindly give us some snapshots of examples of how did it look like when you were, what does it really mean, a crisis in New Zealand?
The crisis was, we had effectively run out of foreign exchange.
Okay.
So that the central bank could no longer conduct business in New Zealand dollars. Borders were closed to us. We had a collapse of productivity. Unemployment, while not officially high, was hidden. Huge state subsidies. Public debt was nearly 100% of GDP. That is just ruinous.
Do you have specific anecdotes like you told us the other day about the central bank, head of the central bank?
The head of the central bank was having to use his own credit card to honour some debts. I mean, it had got to a stage where we were bankrupt in ideas and bankrupt in the economy. So the crisis was really the driver for change. But the reason the crisis came about was there was an unwarranted trust that government systems, government regulation, and government subsidies were the answer to prosperity. That was the real bankruptcy, the idea.
So is it appropriate to say that the bottom line of all this was not just the fact that you ran out of money and you were living on other people's willingness to lend to you,
exactly,
but you also reached a point where you had lost confidence in people, you didn't have foreign direct investment, you didn't have people weren't interested in working or doing business with New Zealand, which is something that has completely altered since the days that you actually did the reforms.
Yeah.
You were ranking number 90 in the OECD, and now you're number 1 for the last 22 years.
I mean, we were a closed economy, and we paid the price for that. So we decided to face the market, not the government. And
Okay.
we opened all of the structures, subsidies on agriculture, overnight abolished. You know, it's a very, hard break from what had been an unsuccessful past. But the critical thing was we had an organising idea that we would trust markets, and we had champions, politicians who were prepared to use their political capital to pioneer independent central banks, codes of fiscal responsibility, free labour markets, unilateral free trade.
Gap ways of keeping your budget and accounting.
In terms of our budget, we just said like Coca-Cola or IBM, you will have a proper statement of accounts, all the assets, all the liabilities, a balance sheet. We moved our budgeting from inputs to outputs and outcomes. I had a contract with my officials. What am I buying? What does it cost? Why am I buying these goods and services? What was the role of the state? We downsized the state and then we made it perform in a modern way.
This is actually something that requires, I have to admit to our audience, more than just the time we have today, because New Zealand of its own is a study that has led since the mid-90s the way we do public sector reform across the world, not only for developing countries, but also for developed countries. A lot of developed countries have decided to follow the way New Zealand chose to bite the bullet and keep on going with its reforms and its changes. What I would like to talk to you before we go to our innovators here and our great entrepreneurs is your point of view in relation to the secret sauce. I was part of the government for a little bit, and I know still that people are afraid of the political cost. And you did say that you did have politicians that decided to use their political capital. But that's only one bit of the secret sauce. What other alliances did you have so that you were able, you need to triage every now and then. You don't always dance with the same partner. Sometimes you need to change.
There was a broad, if you like, coalition, both within politics, most importantly in the important business sector, opinion leaders, that we needed to make a dramatic change from this closed, government-directed past to an open market future. So I had many allies. The business people were allies. The public servants, they didn't want to work in the system that wasted money and didn't deliver service or value to money, to people. So there were a lot, it's like a pent-up demand, if you like, for a more modern way of doing business. And once people got that sort of that sense that we could, once we started to see the growth in jobs, interest rates came down, people understood how they could be competitive in world markets. Once people got that scent in their nostrils, once they got used to the idea that there was going to be, this rapid innovation and this rapid reform was going to have a wonderful payoff, they had more confidence in it. Of course, there was resistance. Like physics, every action produces a reaction. But there was a broad coalition of ideas from both sides of, if you like, the political divide. So the reforms were started, if you like, on the left and continued on the right for sufficient time to change institutions, to change behaviours, and ultimately to change expectations and culture. And that's been the real merit of the reform. We do not expect the government to get in our way. We do not expect the government to make the growth. It's the entrepreneurs who make the growth. We wanted a good public policy framework. There was a strong constituency for it. And now it is up to individuals and enterprises to make the most of that trading opportunity we have.
And if I'm not wrong, now everybody wants to do business with New Zealand. New Zealand ranks #1 in the doing business indicators as well as in the OECD indicators. And New Zealand is doing business with China, not because, New Zealand is the producer of milk, for instance, but is the producer of trust, is a producer of confidence. And this is exactly the secret sauce, if you ask me. The fact that when you change and manage to transform the impossible, you generate something that is not measurable, which is trust
Sorry.
and confidence.
China's a good example. So New Zealand, little New Zealand, we pioneered the first free trade agreement with China, of anybody. We were the sponsor of China into the World Trade Organization. And now I'm a Chinese appointed director on an infant formula company. And you're right, I'm not selling milk powder to babies, I'm selling trust.
Correct.
And that trust that we had, because we were the pioneer, small country, very, very big trading country, we were the ones who said, we want you too to be part of this dynamic of free market and trading.
Tell me, so before we go to James and Mike, tell me please, remind us, how big is New Zealand?
New Zealand is 4 million people and 40 million sheep. But the sheep don't make the decisions.
The sheep don't make the
No.
decision. 4 million people, a small island country, very similar to Greece, that has changed its way of doing business, has changed its present so that it has a future.